Okay, let's go ahead and start filling out the properties for the different functions. For the parameters, like so far, right now we have add keys, and our parameter is going to be the num key and then the number coin. Those are going to work for us for what we currently have set up, so we don't really have to worry too much about that part. The other part, though, that we do need to fill out, though, is going to be our player states. So let's go ahead and start off. We'll go into our player state options. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and add one if statement up here. On our update, right now we have it set so that it's just constantly running through the state, the set player states. Let's actually set a statement in here. We'll just call this one if. We'll do a check on a true or false here. We'll say that if change Mario, which is our current check we put in right here, if it's true, then let's actually say that we'll go in there and take our set player state and change it. Alright, that way it's not being constantly called. It's only being called once whenever a change state actually happens. Alright, then for the set player state, let's go ahead and go back down into it. And for this function, what we're really looking for is just to kind of change, for instance, the small one, to change the character to a smaller size. For this, we'll make sure that his player changes back to a large size and that he has the red and blue texture. And then for the Mario Fire, we'll make sure that he has the white texture and the right size. So let's go ahead and start filling in the properties here. I'm going to go below the print statement. Again, we could keep the print statement in. We could even do a debug log on it, and then once you're done with it, you can take it out. But for right now, we'll go ahead and leave it in just to be sure that we're getting getting to the right player state. All right. So for this one, let's start off by just changing the local scale of the character. So we'll just call up our transform. Let's see, transform, and we're going to choose for the transform. There should be a local scale right there. So the local scale, let's go ahead and set up a local scale. This will be a vector 3 because we're actually changing the x, y, and z, which is just right here, our local scale x, y, z. So we'll take this one, and what we're going to do is actually just change part of them. We don't want to really scale them down uniformly. We'll just kind of squash them. So we'll set this to about like a 0.75, somewhere around there. Let's see how that looks. Alright, so we're going to just squash them down this way, up and down on the y-axis. And so for this one, we've got the local scale of the character being scaled down. Let's go ahead and just try that real fast. Is that when we save it and when we play it, he's going to start off that way. So just kind of notice how when he comes up, and there he goes. So the player small, if the change Mario is set to true, notice how now he just squashes down. Okay. So when you uncheck it, that's not going to do anything because right now all the other states don't have anything to change him back up. But the player himself looks pretty good. I think he'll be recognizable enough as a small character with just a scale down like that. Alright, so we can go ahead and turn this one off. Alright, and you'll notice he just pops back to the other one. This will be our local scale. So we could do it like this, and then we could also go ahead and jump in and we'll go ahead and copy this. And we'll place it into the other two. So for instance, this one, we'll change it back to a 1.0 for the local scale for the standard one and for the fire one. And then for the Mario dead state, this could actually be 2, and it could be a check on whether he's small or large. You can also leave the scale off so that if it goes to the Mario dead state, it's just going to be whichever state he was currently in for his local scale. Alright. For the first part, though, let's go ahead and jump back up to the Mario small again. Now, inside of here, something to consider is that when he's small, what can he do and what can he not do? Okay, so for instance, on this, if we were to actually start, like inside of the update, when we start putting in the ability to fire, can this Mario small actually shoot? You know, if he can't shoot, then it should probably stay at a can't shoot. It should be false. All right, and then let's go ahead and go down here and put that in there. So for instance, on this one, we probably want to make sure that can shoot is as a definite false, so whatever state he came from, we're going to make sure that he can't shoot anymore at that state. Okay, we could do the same thing inside of the Mario large. We know that at Mario large, if he's not the fire Mario, then he can't shoot either. So can shoot will also equal false on this one. Alright, and then the Mario fire, well, that's actually what the reason the can shoot is for. So we'll say on the Mario fire, we'll say can shoot is actually going to equal true. Alright, so we now have we've now got one extra piece right here for each statement. The can shoot, though, let's go ahead and actually make this where it has functionality. So if we set the Mario fire to can shoot inside of the update function, and we're just going to kind of jump back and forth here. So inside the update function, let's add an if statement here. So we'll say that if can shoot is true, then let's actually instantiate based off of the player's direction and whether they're pushing the shoot button. Let's actually instantiate an object to come out. So for the first part, let's go ahead and just set up a couple of things. First thing, in order to find, so if I'm trying to think through the whole process here, one thing that I need to do is make sure I know which direction the player's facing. So if he's facing to the right, he'll use the right socket. If he's facing to the left, he'll use the left socket. Alright, so in order to find those in our update function, let's go ahead and make a variable, and we'll call this one player controls. And again, we'll just get the component, and we'll grab our player controls script. Okay. So with that, the player control script, inside of the if can shoot, we'll use that to call up to get the move direction, so we know whether it's left or right. In the can shoot, let's go ahead and set up a variable. This variable, we'll just call it clone. Clone's going to be what we use to actually instantiate an object, which will be our fireball. Okay, so for this, we need two statements. We need to check for if the button press for the shoot has been pushed and which direction it's facing. So we'll go ahead and create an if statement here. We'll just call up our input and get button down. So if the input get button down is currently fire, so if you remember the control scheme for Mario to fire to shoot with is actually the same as the run button. So if that one is actually pushed down, and we want to make sure we could do a quick check here on our option up here, the projectile fire. If there isn't anything placed inside of the inspector, we can actually set this in here. We can actually set check for whether it's null or it has something in it. If it has something in it, then it'll actually allow you to go inside the statement. So we could say if the button's pushed down and if projectile fire is true, and we want to do our last check and the player controls. So player controls dot move direction is going to be equal to 0. So 0, remember, is going to be to the left. So this statement is basically checking for if the player pushes the button and there is actually a projectile inside of the inspector, and the movement direction is currently on the left. So if all of those statements are true, then inside of here, let's make sure we've got that. So inside of here, we'll do a little code block, and let's place in some code for this one. We'll say clone. So again, we're just using our variable we created right here. We'll say clone is going to equal the instantiation. So we're going to instantiate, and if you recall, for your instantiate, you've got the properties down below. So the parameters for it, it's going to look for the original object, then the position, rotation. Alright, so for ours, the object itself is going to be the projectile fire. And what we want to have with it, where we want it to actually instantiate from, the position, is going to be our projectile, and it's going to be the socket left. And from that one, we want to actually get our transform dot position. Alright, and then the rotation, we're just going to take the transform from this object's transform rotation. There we go. And that'll give us our option to shoot to the left. If we want, we could actually just copy the code from right here. We could copy this one, and we'll paste that one in here. This is going to give us the shoot to the right. So we'll just go over here, make sure the move direction is actually looking to is equal to 1, so his character is looking to the right. All right. Now, this is going to create the object. But in addition to creating the object, we want to make sure we're actually forcing it into a direction. So if we were to create the object right now, it would just simply drop right where the object is here, but it wouldn't go anywhere. So let's go ahead and take our clone. So the object that we're creating, the instantiation, is going to be clone, and we're going to actually get the rigid body from it. So the clone.rigidBody, we're going to add a force. And if we add the force, this is going to actually help the object start moving in a direction. And what we want to do is move it in a left and right direction. So, for instance, with this one, since it's going to the left, this object going to the left, meaning it's equal to the move direction 0. If it's that one, then that means that we want to have a negative value. So we'll do negative 90, and we'll do 0 and 0. All right. So same thing down below here. Alright, so we have the clone, and we'll do again the rigid body, and we'll add the force. And this time, so again, rather than going to the left, if we're going to the right, it would be a positive number. So we'll do 90, 0, 0. Alright, so this is going to give us the ability to push the button down. If there's a projectile fire object in there, and the player control is left or to the right, then it'll it'll create an object and move it off at a force of negative 90 or positive 90. Alright. And if neither of those, if none of this is true and you can't shoot, you could also you could place one extra statement down here just in case, and we could call it a return. Alright. So, with that, let's go ahead and save. Let's go back over into here. And let's check on whether or not we can actually shoot. So we do have the object. Double check in your player properties. You should have the projectile fire. You should have the fireball right there. What I could do is just go inside of here. We could push play. And at the moment, remember, if can shoot is true, so we have to make sure that the can shoot option is true. And for that one to be true, let's see, actually that was a, do we have that one as, we got it as a private variable. Alright, for the private variable, let's see, can shoot down here on the Mario state. So we'll do the change Mario, so he can actually change states. And then you go to the player state, and you can actually change to Mario Fire. Now, if you notice, do you see how the player dropped out and he flew down below right there? The reason for that is that when the player was at a small state, the character controller, when it tries to grow, the player is already lower, so when it grows, it actually grows below the collision box. So we'll fix that in just a little bit, but we could go ahead and change, before we push play, we could actually change the player state. We'll change it to Mario Fire. And we'll change the change Mario and click on the checkbox. If you do those before you click on play, he'll automatically stay on the top because he was falling to the ground. Now at this state, all we have to do is check on the firing state. So remember, in order to fire, you actually want to use the fire button. And that one for us was, I believe it was control. Let's see. Yeah. So if you push control, then you'll actually be able to see the fire button working right here. Alright, so I've got this one coming this way, and this one should be going out the other way. Let's double check here. Alright, so we have this one working, and it looks like this one's actually not updating with the right direction. So let's double check what we have going right here. Let's see, yeah, it's just dropping from behind him. Alright, so let's go ahead and double check what we have. So if we were to look this over, what did we do when we were, well, at least what did I do when I was doing this? I actually copied from here. I only changed one of the properties. Remember, I only changed this one, but part of the instantiation was calling up the object you're copying from. I got to make sure I actually change the projectile socket to right. So again, this is one of those things, if you caught while you were doing it, great. If you haven't and you still have the same problem I have, then just be sure to go back to it and change it to the right. Alright, so if we save that one, we go back into here. Alright. So this should allow us so that now that when we move around, we face this way, he shoots that way. We face this way, and he shoots that way. Alright. So we now have the character with the ability to shoot in both directions. And now we need to actually change it so that he's actually in a white outfit rather than a red and blue outfit. And the ball at the moment, you'll notice, actually has collision on it, and we'll fix it so that he doesn't collide with the collision here in a little bit. Alright, so let's see. Inside of here, we'll go back down to our player state. So let's just keep adding to the player state. What do we want it to do? A simple one just to add to it for the moment is just going to be changing the material types for it. So inside of the Mario, let's see, we'll go ahead and start with the Mario Fire right here. Now, if you don't remember how to change a material type, again, this is just another opportunity for you to kind of think about it and see if you can find the right one. It should be just an easy, maybe 5-minute check to figure it out. If I'm trying to change a material on an object that's inside the scene. So for instance, if I'm trying to change one on the Mario Fire, so before I do it, try to figure it out. And if you figure it out, then come back, see if you do it the same way. Alright, so for this one, what I want to do is actually go to the transform. And the transform object from this, I want to get the renderer. So I'm just going to grab the renderer from this. And then when I grab from the renderer, it's going to have the option to do the material. Okay? And then from the material, well, if this is the fire state, up here we were actually grabbing two materials. We got the material Mario Fire. Alright, so down here, when I'm getting the material, I'm actually just wanting the material Mario Fire. Alright, so that's going to set the texture to that one when this statement comes true. Alright, so we can go ahead and save this. And if we were inside of here, remember our last state for it, we changed it for change Mario, and the player state to start with was going to be Mario Fire. So when I play it, this actually should turn him white, so now he's actually inside it with his other outfit. Alright? So, simple change with that one, just the one line grabbing their new material. Now that means though that in order to make sure that he changes to the other states, we need to make sure that's inside for those as well. So for instance, on this one, Mario Large, we want to be sure that the transform render material is set for Mario, let's see, it's going to be material Mario Standard. Alright, and the same thing, because we're using the same texture for the Mario Small, then let's go ahead and add that one into it. There we go. So with this way, that means that whenever we change a state for the player, it makes sure that the material supposed to be rendered is actually set to the right one. Alright, so if we're playing this one again, alright, so we have the character, he loads with this one. Now if I was to actually say inside of here, instead of Mario Fire, we do Mario Large, notice the material changes. And if we go to Mario Large to Mario Small, you have the material change, which is the same material. So if you had a different one, it would change to that. It would change to the different one if you wanted to specify one. And that gives us all three of our states with the right change happening for it. Now we still have an issue though with this. If I go to Mario Large, he falls through the world. Alright, so we need to figure out how to actually increase and decrease the character controller and make sure that the player actually doesn't fall through the world at any point. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's try to figure that out. This is all going to be still inside of our player state, so we'll go ahead and just start creating the small and the large version to make it work. First thing that we want to do, when the player is on small and or big, let's go ahead and turn off the gravity. So for instance, when he's large and he goes to the small state, it's fine because he falls down. But what we really could do is just go ahead and stop gravity from moving up and down, and then adjust the scale of the character, whether it's going up or going down. We don't have to worry about where he's at, because he's not going to fall through anything. Alright, so let's go ahead and just write in some code here. For this one, we'll start off with a small one. For the small one, we're going to take the player controls. So again, player controls is actually being called up here. We're grabbing our character's player controls. Being able to call up that one, we can actually grab our gravity for the character, and we'll set it to 0. Right, and then at that point, let's move the player up just a little bit. So one of the things, if you think about with a player, like when you grab the mushrooms, he kind of like he'll hang in the air for a little bit, and sometimes he'll even kind of move up a little, or he'll grow from that point. So we'll move him up just a little bit. So we'll take, and you can either use the word this, or you can just go straight with the just with transform. Either way, so we'll do transform, and this is going to be translate. We actually just want to move the player up just a little bit. So we'll say 0, and playing around with the numbers, the 0.2 came out to be a good number to use for it. So we'll say 0.2 and 0. So it's going to move up just a little bit on the y-axis right there. Alright, and then we can go for our scale, so he'll scale up. The other thing, notice with the smaller player, is that, here, we'll play this real quick. With the small player, do you notice right here? So if you check out the feet aren't actually touching the ground. When the character controller, the cylinder right here, when it actually goes to try to touch, it's actually above it. So instead of having that problem with it, let's actually scale down the size of the character controller height. So again, this is another option, is that opportunity for you is, if I was going to scale down the character controller height, how do I access it? Now, these are small but simple problems, and these are things that you should get kind of used to trying to figure out how to get access to it. Alright, so think about it for a little bit, see if you can come up with being able to grab the character controller's height. Alright? Alright, so when you do get to the point, if you think you've got it figured out, then just look at this one, or if you're completely stumped, then we can go through it as well. So for the character controller height, if I was to just go through and try to figure it out, well, character controller has a height. The height currently set to 0.5. Well, if I'm trying to get the access to the character controller, we have this one right here. This is character controller. Right? So inside of here, I can actually call up our character controller. Alright, so we have character controller, and then the height currently says height. So if you want, quick check, you could go into your help and the Unity scripting, and I could check for a, we'll do the character controller. And let's see, on the character controller, it might be the one right behind here. There we go. On character controller, we do have one called height. So if you'll notice, in order to get the height, we actually call up our character controller, and we grab our height directly from there. So inside of here, that means that if we want it, we go character controller dot, and we call up height. And then we'll make our height, after some testing, going for a 0.45 is actually a good number for it. So if I save this, I can actually go back into here, and we'll play it. And then for this one, we'll change to the small. And then double check. Oops, looks like the 1 point on translate may have been too much on that part. Let's go ahead and turn it off. Oh, actually we need to make sure we turn back on the gravity. When the translate, the reason why it was just flying off was that translate was just continuing to go. It never turned off, and gravity was staying on. So let's go ahead and finish this part off. Is that we've got translate moving them up. Local scale changes the size, and then we change the character controller to fit. Couple more things then. Let's go ahead and jump back to here, and we'll go ahead and just turn the gravity back on. So we'll go back to our player controls dot gravity, and let's set that back to the original gravity. Now notice, you see what I'm doing at this point? I'm actually hard coding numbers here. Is that a good idea? Probably not. The gravity should actually be a number set through the inspector, and then anytime that number is actually changed, it should be adjusting throughout here, especially when we're resetting these values. So at this point, it's fine. I'm working over the code in a kind of a simple way. But if you're going for a larger scope for your project, make sure that you actually adjust this not through here, not directly like that. Alright, so we have our gravity, we set it to 20. And then again, we've got our can shoot is equal to false. We'll go ahead and save this. Once it does the slight movement up, it'll immediately jump back with gravity set to 20. So we can go back to here. And once he falls, so we'll go back and we'll choose Mario Small. Alright. And it looks like we still have a little bit of an issue. Actually, it's that one right there. Let's make sure that when we're done with our change, we'll actually set the change Mario to false. But notice the good side of this one is that the character is now solid, touching the ground right there. So, last little part right here. Once we do the can shoot is false, let's go ahead and put one more line, and we're going to do the change Mario, and we're just going to set change Mario to equal to false as well. That means that up here, so inside of our code, the change Mario, when we change it, is currently checked on true. That way we can change it. Once it's changed, it does need to be set to false. Alright, so we'll save this, and we'll go back to play. Alright, so you'll notice that when I change it to Mario Small, the change Mario will uncheck. So we'll do it this way, and then he does a little bit of that movement up, and then falls on the ground. Alright? Okay, so we've got the small character work. Now notice there's a bit of code in terms of just like really kind of getting picky about what we do with the character. This is one of those smaller things that the amount of code could probably double or triple in size when you start polishing it off as to what you want the character to actually do, how you want him to really be moved around or created when he hits one of the mushroom grows or an extra life or any of those things. Well, let's go ahead and continue working on this one. So again, even when he's small though, he still has that same issue. So we'll show you on this part, is that when I do small, he does fine. But when I go into here, I'll say change Mario to large. Oops. Let's see, there we go. And he still falls through the floor like that, alright? So we want to add similar code to the Mario Large and the Mario Fire to make sure he works out okay when he changes to the larger state. Alright, so with the Mario Large, let's go ahead and take a look at Mario Large. We'll do the transform on this character. Actually, let's go ahead and start off with we'll do similar to above. We'll do the player controls, and the gravity, we'll go ahead and make it equal to 0. That way there's no movement forcing him down while we're working on it. We can just move him very freely up and down anywhere we want. We'll do the transform, translate. And for the translate on this one, we can go ahead and just we can just push him up just a little bit like we did before. So we'll do the 0.2 and 0. And these you can easily just change out the variables, how much you want him to actually move up. And this could even be a variable called like player grow move state, and you could just change the variable through the inspector as well. So we've got our translate moving up. We've got our local vector changing back to 1s all the way across the board. The next part we could actually do that we need to make sure we correct for. Remember the character controller height was changed to 0.45. So with this one, we will go ahead and change our character controller, and this is going to be changing the character controller height back to 0.5. So we'll take the height is going to equal 0.5. Alright, now at this point, now again, just as a reminder, is that I'm being very specific with this character and this character's controller. If you bring in your own character, and your character is 6 feet tall and its height is actually 1.0, well, this whole area needs to be fixed. The height areas need to actually be adjusted to work for your new character controller. So when you're working on the code, if you bring in something new, just remember that if it's not exactly the same, you're going to have to make adjustments for it. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue with this one. We have our material changing force, which is good. Let's go ahead and turn back on our gravity. So we'll do let's see, player controls. So the player controls dot gravity, it's going to equal 20 again. Alright, and then the can shoot is false, and remember we need to turn off our change Mario. And change Mario will equal false. That way it only does the change one time through. Alright, so let's go ahead and save this. And go back into here. Alright, so what we should be able to do, for instance, is change to Mario Small. We're going to say the change, we'll do a can change. Actually, let's see if we can change to Mario Large, and then we'll pick the can change. And if you notice, did you see the little hop? And then he stayed up above the surface. Alright, so it was enough of a movement upwards on the translation to keep him inside the scene. So again, we can do the small. We'll click on can change. He goes small. We'll do the large and change. Alright, so as long as this is working, he stays above the surface, then we have a good transition for it. We don't have to worry about anything falling through. So let's go ahead and take the same thing that we did there and actually add that to the Mario Fire. Alright, so, and this can actually be pretty much just a copy of what we currently have. So we'll grab all of this, and we'll just paste it in here. There we go. So we have those all the way down to there. And we'll finish off with those three. I'll just copy and paste those over the other one. Alright, so at this point, this should allow us to change states for the character all the way through. The can shoot, make sure it's actually true, not false. And change Mario's false, and break. Alright, so that gives us all three of our statements to change for this character. The last one, when you get to the dead state, remember, we could do a simple one, which would just simply be calling up the destroy, and we'll just destroy this game object. Alright, and once you change the, once you destroy the game object, we can just do change Mario equals false. And we'll flesh this one out as well once we start adding in the final code for the gameplay side when we're creating the Mario character to be hit by the enemy. Alright, and that should actually finish off. Let's see, we got this one, we got those. That'll finish off our set player state. This will allow us to actually call up our player state at different points whenever, for instance, if he's large and he gets hit by the enemy, then he's going to be able to get his call up for changing to a small Mario. If he is a small Mario, then we would set it to the death state and he would die, and then start back over at the start point. Alright, so we've got those set up. The last thing that we want to do is just go through, we'll comment all the code in. Also, just to double check, make sure when you do go back into here, play through, make sure all your states do work. So for instance, with these in, I'll just start off with this one, make sure that I can fire from both sides. So if we can shoot, works both ways. Alright, so if those work, that's great. Then the next thing that we want to check for is that the player can actually change. So we'll go for the player state, and for the player state we'll choose Mario Small, and then we'll just click on the change Mario. We'll change to the small one, and we'll change to the large one. Change to large, and then just to make sure that we've checked through it again, go to the Mario Fire from the small, and just to make sure that he does pop up above the ground plane. Alright, and that actually gives us the information we need for those. The last one is just the Mario dead state. We'll do the change Mario, and it should disappear. There we go. So now we've got all of our parts and pieces working for the player states. We have our options set in place for the can shoot and how they're going to shoot. This is actually pretty much finishes this side of it off. We'll continue working on it though as we build up all the parts and pieces for each one, including the like for each of the objects, the mushroom type, the extra life, all those. They'll start tying in everything into here as well.